Uh,
Hello.
sorry. I was fine, and then I heard him just make the slightest sound, and I started laughing.
It's just
again.
this little
That's my
cute,
fault.
little tiny
Yeah,
burp.
it was a little something.
Best sync
Little-
noise ever.
Little tiny little BB burp. Hello and welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 13 of our so famous, it's infamous series of YouTube videos focusing on how to become a level 1 judge. My name is Bryan and I am joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles Feather.
Hello, hello.
And the one and only Marco Sanchez.
Hello, everybody. So let's start by giving a shout out to our sponsor for both this episode and this entire L1 series, Judge Foundry. Judge Foundry is a membership-based nonprofit organization serving the US and Canada in providing certifications for tabletop gaming officials. They manage everything to do with obtaining and maintaining your certification and provide educational resources just like this one to ensure that every Judge Foundry certified judge has the knowledge and skills that they need to be successful. When it comes to running Magic events at your local game store or at a larger international convention, Judge Foundry is a great resource for you to certify your skills. For more information on Judge Foundry, visit judgefoundry.org and click on the orange Become a Judge button to find out how you can earn your level. And you can join the Judge Foundry Discord to chat and interact with the Judge Foundry judging community in the US and Canada. The links for both are in the description below. And now, finally, layers.
Previously on JudgeCast, we discussed the differences between one-shot and continuous effects and gave you a taste of the layer system that governs how continuous effects interact with each other. Today, we're going to crack open this onion's layers and cover the layers you need to know for your level 1 exam. Type changing effects and the power and toughness layer. The focus of the series is on what a level 1 judge working F&M or scheduled events at a larger event should know. As always, we don't cover every corner case in depth, and in case of layers, this is going to be doubly true, as L1s are not expected to know how all the layers interact. If you wish to go deeper or explore topics outside the scope of what is needed for the level 1 exam, you can delve into our extensive library at judgecast.com or search for us on your podcast app of choice. For this topic, we are also covering layers on the podcast, and it will also be split up into 2 episodes. Our podcasts are typically at least 1 hour, so you get significantly more detailed discussion, humor, insight, and of course, our interminable musings.
Yes. To start us off, let's do a quick review. Continuous effects are effects that modify characteristics of an object, control of an object, or affects players or the rules of the game for a fixed or indefinite period of time. So if an effect tells you to take control of a permanent for a duration of time, or that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, you're dealing with continuous effects. When we talk about modifying characteristics of an object, we mean changing its color, affecting its type, subtype, text of the card, abilities on that card. In fact, the layers lay out exactly what type of characteristics can be affected.
The different layers where continuous effects can interact are copy, control, text, type, color, abilities, and power and toughness, and kind of an unnamed everything else layer.
The kitchen sink.
Yeah, the kitchen sink layer. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Now, that's more than you need to know, and that's more for your fun and your continued development and learning. But on the L1 test, you will only be tested on effects in the type layer, so type changing effects, and the power and toughness layer to make sure you know how to calculate the power and toughness of a creature. Just remember, if any effects apply to an object within these layers, we apply them in that order from top to bottom. So copy will always come before control all the way down.
The whole purpose for layers is to help us figure out what happens when 2 continuous effects try to affect the same object. Let's look at a classic example. What happens if you have a 1/1 white soldier creature and an effect that says all white creatures get +1/+1, such as Divine Sacrament, and then resolve another effect that says target permanent becomes colorless, using a card like Moonlace. Did the creature get the +1/+1 before turning into a colorless creature? Or is it colorless and therefore doesn't get the bonus, staying a 1/1?
Okay, let's look at the order of layers to figure this example out. Here, you see that the color as a layer applies before power and toughness changing effects. So any continuous effect that modifies an object's color applies first, turning our white soldier into a colorless soldier. Then the power and toughness effect looks to see if it's a white creature, or goes to apply rather, and then doesn't apply to the colorless creature. Colorless 1/1 seems sad, also seems pretty straightforward. Let's break down the first layer. So we said that we were going to discuss the type changing layer and the power and toughness changing layer. Power and toughness, which is probably, in terms of parts, it is the most complex layer. So even though it is last on the list, we're going to discuss it first.
All right, so we're talking about continuous effects and how they're going to interact with the power and toughness layer. But first of all, we have to have a power and toughness to interact with. So the first thing before we even start thinking about layers is going to be the power and toughness that is printed on the card, or the power and toughness that is set on the card or the token when it is created. Now from there, the power and toughness layer actually has 4 sublayers. I'll briefly run through them before diving into the first one. First off is CDAs, or characteristic defining abilities. Then power and toughness setting, but not modifying, where you'll include changing what the base power and toughness is. Power and toughness modifying, but not setting, is the third one. And that's where you throw in things like counters or changing effects. And finally, switching. All of this is to say that the base power and toughness, the printed power and toughness on the card, is where you're going to start. And then we'll dive right into the sublayers. So the first sublayer would be what we're going to call layer 7A, effects from characteristic defining abilities that define power and toughness. And the poster child for this layer has always been Tarmogoyf. However, I'll also pull up Cosmogoyf, his newer cousin, because, well, it's the same thing and it's in standard right now, so let's use both of them for the example here. Now, characteristic defining abilities work in all zones, and it's going to convey information that would normally be found elsewhere on an object. In this instance, the CDA in the rules text tells us what should be in either of these Goyf's power and toughness boxes, and these apply outside the game as well. So Tarmogoyf says its power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number plus 1. So that's how you calculate its power and toughness.
Verse 7b, the next layer in the power and toughness layer section, effects that set power and toughness to a specific number, including base power and toughness, are next. This would be a good time to look at a card like Turn to Frog, or Witness Protection, or even Godhead of Awe. All of these are setting base power and toughness to 1/1, among other things that they may or may not be doing. We're cute little frog creature, yes.
All right. The next layer is 7C, which is effects and counters that modify power and toughness. So the previous layer was setting power and toughness to specific values. Base power and toughness 1/1, base power and toughness 3/3. This is things that modify the power and toughness off of the base. So things like Wall of Roots providing a -0/-1 counter, Walking Ballista with its +1/+1 counter, and Giant Growth with just its +3/+3.
And then finally we have layer 7D, which are effects that switch a creature's power and toughness. Now in this layer, it's pretty straightforward. You take whatever the number is after you've gone through all the other sublayers and figure out what the power is and figure out what the toughness is. And then you swap them around. Whatever was the toughness is now the power. Whatever was the power is now the toughness. For example, on Wandering Fumarole, you can turn that 1/4 into a 4/1 with its activated ability when it is animated as a creature, or on the card Inside Out, where it just tells you switch the power and toughness until end of turn.
Okay, so first, we're going to start with a simple case. All right. Within the power and toughness layer, I have two effects that want to change the base power and toughness of creatures. I have a Godhead of All that says other creatures are 1/1. And I have a Harmonious Archon that says non-Archine creatures have base power and toughness 3/3. So I have a lonely little bear cub right here. Is it a 1/1 or is it a 3/3? I have two continuous effects. One saying make it a 1/1. One saying make it a 3/3. Which one wins? All right. When we are in the same layer, okay, which is in this particular case layer 7B, then we use timestamp. We apply the first effect in timestamp order, and then we apply all of them in timestamp order. Okay, so if Godhead of All came out first and Harmonious Archon came out later, then my bear cub would be a 3/3. If we switch that, where Harmonious Archon was first and Godhead of All was second, then my bear cub would be a 1/1. All right, we apply them in order. Okay, you might have heard people say the last one wins. Now, in this particular case, because we are setting values, then yes, last one wins. Okay, but in reality, we are applying all of them in order. It's just the way this particular interaction works. The last one kind of makes all the other ones irrelevant, but they're still applied in order.
So now you might ask yourself, well, how does one get a timestamp? How do you know when each of these cards starts to apply, or what is their timestamp? So there are a few different ways that we can give an effect a timestamp. Any continuous effect that is generated by a spell or ability receives a timestamp at the time it's created, whereas, for example, a counter receives a timestamp as it's put onto an object or a player. An object receives a timestamp as soon as it enters a zone, like when a creature resolves and enters the battlefield. And auras and equipment, and fortifications, of course, because there's two of them now, receive a new timestamp each time it becomes attached to an object or player.
So next up, what we're going to do is we discussed interactions within a layer in a very simple scenario. Now we're going to start crossing layers, mixing and matching. And one of the key distinctions is within a layer, you look at timestamps. When you cross layers, you do not look at timestamp. You look at the order that the layer occurs. Okay?
No, Egon, don't cross the streams.
Right. Okay. So within the layer, within that specific layer, timestamp matters. When you cross layers, timestamp does not matter. Okay? As Charles, do you have an example for us?
If I first cast Inside Out targeting a dazzling agent my opponent controls, and then cast Blinding Spray later in the turn, what is its resulting power and toughness after Blinding Spray resolves? Let's run through the layers to find out. At the time Blinding Spray is cast, the Dazzling Angel is a 3/2 because of the Inside Out. So the natural conclusion might be after Blinding Spray resolves, the Angel is a -1/2. Now that's using timestamps, and we said that we only apply timestamps for effects within the same layer. Blinding Spray, even though it was cast last, applies in layer 7C, and Inside Out is in layer 7D. So we actually need to apply Blinding Spray before Inside Out. So we apply Blinding Spray, making the Dazzling Angel a -2/3. Then, when we apply Inside Out in layer 7D, we switch the power and toughness, and our Dazzling Angel is now not so dazzling as a 3 power -2 toughness creature, and will then be unalived and sent to the graveyard.
Now that we've handled that, let's really start laying it on and see what happens. In a flurry of spells in a commander game, because obviously commander, Charles controls a Cosmogoyf. I will cast a Twisted Image targeting the Cosmogoyf, and it's going to resolve. Charles is going to cast Giant Growth, and after it resolves, they are going to cast Scale Up. Okay? it resolves also. Stack is clean. After those 3 spells are cast, it will then be targeted by Marcos's Augur Spree, and then after that resolves, Marcos is going to hit it again with an Instill Infection. Okay? Assuming that there are currently 6 cards owned by Charles in exile, what's the power and toughness of Charles's Cosmogoyf?
All right. Let's run through the layers. So, starting off right at the very top, Cosmogoyf has a power and toughness characteristic defining ability on it. So, with 6 cards that Charles owns in exile, Cosmogoyf starts off as a 6/7. From there, we apply power and toughness setting, which would be from the scale up. So, Cosmogoyf now becomes a 6/4. We then go down to power and toughness modifying. Now, here we have a few, so let's look at their timestamps to see the order in which we apply them. Giant Growth resolved first, cast by Bryan, so the 6/4 turns into a 9/7. Then Augur Spree gives it +4/-4, turning it into a 13/3. Then Instill Infection puts a -1/-1 counter on it, so it'll go down to a 12/2.
Now, one thing that you might be thinking is, we're applying these in timestamp order, but it doesn't matter. And in this specific case, in this specific layer, you would be correct, because we're just adding and subtracting numbers, and if I +3 and -4, or -4 and +3, I still get to the same result ultimately. All right. So in this particular layer, in this one only, timestamps,
Yeah, but it can matter because some of those effects, while applying to power and toughness, might also have other effects that apply in different places. So still important to keep timestamps as well. So back to it. We left off with a 12/2 Cosmogoyf, and we had one more spell, which was Bryan's first spell that was cast on it, the Twisted Image. Twisted Image will have us switch the power and toughness, so our Cosmogoyf will end up at the end of everything as a 2 power, 12 toughness Cosmogoyf. Pretty easy, actually, when you look at everything that way, right?
Yeah. One of the things that might be a little confusing about this chain of events is that at different points in time in the turn, after the Giant Growth resolved or after the Scale Up resolved, you could be getting different results. Okay? Like the end power and toughness of the creature can be changing. Okay, but when you run through the layers, you always start with its printed power and toughness, and then go through the layers. You start at the beginning, go all the way to the end. So don't get too hung up on the fact that in the middle of things, earlier in the turn, it was something different. Like our early example with the Dazzling Angel, when Blinding Spray was cast, okay, it was a 3/2. Okay. But because the inside out effect applied last, we have to run through the layers and apply it last, like the Blinding Spray kind of butts in line because it's in a different layer.
So let's take all of this knowledge and jump to layer 4, types. This is where all the continuous effects that interact with type changing effects apply. For example, Snake Form, which sets a subtype to snake, overriding any others. There's also effects like Arcane Adaption, which adds a subtype in addition to its other types, which will leave whatever there was in place. Otherwise, there's also cards like Nameless Inversion, which have an effect that remove all subtypes, but leave the type alone. Or cards like Imprisoned in the Moon, which outright changes the entire type to a land from whatever it was. All these effects just fall under type changing abilities within layer 4.
So let's take a look at an example of some timestamps and type changing effects. Marcos controls a Colossal Dreadmaw and has a Nameless Inversion cast on it. It loses all creature types, so it's no longer a dinosaur. I then enchant it with a Demonic Embrace, making it a demon. Okay? So it is creature type demon. Now, this sounds super straightforward because it is. That's the purpose of layers. A lot of these interactions end up being super straightforward. Okay, now let's reverse the order of that. Let's say we enchant the Colossal Dreadmaw with Demonic Embrace. That makes it a dinosaur demon. and then I cast Nameless Inversion on it, making it lose all creature types, so it's just a creature with no subtypes. All right. Now, these cards, in addition to changing type, also illustrate that cards that continuous effects can do more than just one thing in one layer. All right. Nameless Inversion is changing things in the type layer, causing it to lose all creature types, and the layer 7B, the power and toughness, layer 7C, the power and toughness modifying layer. All right. Demonic Embrace is enchanted creature gets +3/+1, has flying, and is a demon in addition to its other types. The demon in addition to its other types is layer 4, the type changing layer. Has flying is layer 6, adding abilities, and the +3/+1 is layer 7C, power and toughness modifying. So if we were to figure out overall what the Dreadmaw looks like, we would look at layer 4 and say, I have two effects, one trying to remove all creature types, one trying to add demon in addition to its other types, and we would base on timestamp. Okay, and in the last case, we said the Colossal Dreadmaw had Demonic Embrace enchanted on it, and then Nameless Inversion got cast. So we would say it is a dinosaur demon, and then it loses all creature types, becoming a typeless Dreadmaw. Then in layer 6, we apply flying, and then in layer 7C, we apply the +3/+1 of the Demonic Embrace, and then the +3/-3 of Nameless Inversion, giving it a total of +6/-2, making it a 12/4.
Beefy.
And while there is a lot more to the layer system, this kind of sums up what you need to know for the level 1 exam.
Yeah. For more, you can always go listen to our accompanying layers episodes, which should be coming out approximately either just right before or right after this episode debuts on YouTube. If you're in the future, tell us how everything went, tell us the winning lotto numbers, and tell us how you enjoyed those episodes as well. But otherwise, one more big thank you to our sponsor. So we'd like to thank Judge Foundry one more time for their support in sponsoring this series, for helping you earn your level 1 certification. Make sure to visit judgefoundry.org and click on the orange Become a Judge button to learn how you can join the magic judging community in the US and Canada and earn your certification with Judge Foundry.
Join us next time as we continue our series for earning your level 1 certification and start talking about replacement effects. And if you want to reach out to us, we have our own Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. The invite link to our Discord is in the description below, as well as our JudgeCast and individual social media links. If you're a fan of our content, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell to be notified of when new videos in this series are posted, or when a new episode of our full podcast is released. Make sure to check out our channel's playlist for our complete L1 series, as well as our Learn to Judge playlist with episodes from JudgeCast's history focused on helping you become a better judge. And as always, you can find everything relating to JudgeCast at judgecast.com. With that, I'm Charles Feather, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
And I'm Bryan Prilliman, and Hans, run! It's a CDA!